Welcome to the Electric Wire Podcast. We bring you news and views on the most pressing issues facing Wisconsin's electric industry, from policymakers, executives, and customer and environmental advocates. Bringing you these discussions, we are the Customers First Coalition. Here's your host, Executive Director Kristin Gilkes.
Welcome to the Electric Wire, everyone. I am your host, Kristin Gilkes. I'm pleased to welcome you for a very special episode today with Commissioner Ellen Nowak and Senator Julian Bradley. We are honored to host sort of an exit interview with Commissioner Nowak as she exits the Public Service Commission after 11 years of service there. I wanted to just mention quickly that the Customers First Coalition will be hosting a power breakfast in Madison at the Premier Park Hotel on the Capitol Square. Our power breakfast will be on April 13th in the morning. And we welcome all of you who are interested in learning more about nuclear power, new technologies, and the new policy implications for Wisconsin with those new technologies. So save the date now. We will have registration opening within the next couple weeks here, as well as some speaker announcements. Before we hop into the episode with Commissioner Nowak and Senator Bradley, I wanted to share with you a resolution that the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners approved at their winter meeting honoring Commissioner Nowak. And so I will just read a couple highlights from this resolution, and we'll also link to the full resolution in our show notes so you can read all about Ellen's accomplishments, both here in Wisconsin and nationally with NARUC. It starts out, whereas Ellen Nowak was first appointed to the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin in July of 2011 by Governor Scott Walker and reconfirmed for a new 6-year term beginning on March 1st, 2013, whereas Commissioner Nowak was named chairperson of the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin in March of 2015, whereas Commissioner Nowak was elected as NARUC's second vice president in November of 2016 and subsequently elected to serve as NARUC first vice president in November of 2017, whereas on the cusp of becoming president of NARUC in March of 2018, Governor Walker appointed Commissioner Nowak as Secretary of the Department of Administration, the top administrative position in Wisconsin government, whereas Administrator Nowak served in that role until just prior to the end of Governor Walker's term, when she was then reappointed to the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin as chairperson in January of 2019, whereas Commissioner Nowak was again appointed to the NARUC Board of Directors, where she took on the role of coordinating NARUC's ambassador program, pairing new commissioners with experienced commissioners to assist in their entry into becoming a state utility regulator and member of NARUC, whereas Commissioner Nowak was appointed chair of NARUC's International Committee, making her a committee chair member of the NARUC Board of Directors. And whereas prior to her initial appointment to the PSC of Wisconsin, Commissioner Nowak served in a variety of positions in public service, including as the chief of staff to the Waukesha County Executive, as legal counsel and subsequent chief of staff to the Speaker of the Wisconsin Assembly, as well as a private practice attorney. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners, convened at its 2023 Winter Policy Summit, extends its sincere gratitude to Commissioner Ellen Nowak for her outstanding leadership and for her support of NARUC's mission, and be it further resolved that her many friends and colleagues are pleased to wish Ellen the very best in all her future endeavors. That was such a nice resolution honoring Commissioner Nowak and providing some background on her history of public service here in Wisconsin. We here at the Customers First Coalition want to extend our sincerest gratitude to Commissioner Nowak as well. She has been a frequent guest on the podcast, as well as a guest at our Power Breakfast events through the years. And so thank you, Commissioner Nowak, sincerely. And I hope you all enjoy the interview with Commissioner Ellen Nowak and my co-host, Senator Julian Bradley. I want to say welcome and thank you for joining to Commissioner Ellen Nowak and Senator Julian Bradley. It's so good to have both of you here today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for having us. This is a great honor.
Senator Bradley, I asked you to co-host this episode with me because I know you and Ellen have been friends for a long time. And as you've assumed your role leading the Utilities and Technology Committee in the Senate, I know Ellen, being at the commission, has been a source of advice for you and she's helped you along the way. So I wanted to start out by asking how you two got to know each other.
Sure. Well, I'll kick us off. I'm State Senator Julian Bradley. I was first elected in 2020 to represent the 28th Senate District, which is parts of 4 counties. They are Milwaukee, Waukesha, Walworth, and Racine counties. I am heading into my second session, or now we have started our second session, where I'm serving as the chairman of the Utilities, Technology, Telecommunications Committee in the state Senate. As far as how long and how I got to know Ellen, I think our paths crossed quite a few times, over the last decade or so, but it was really the last 3 or 4 years of getting to work with her that I feel like we got to know each other really well. And Ellen has been an incredible resource. Energy and utility issues aren't everybody's specialty. And so when you get into the role that I have, I come from a broadband background, so I have part of the committee, but there's a little bit that I still had to learn, and I try to lean on those resources, the people that are known industry experts. So whether it's other stakeholders or whether it's, a great tenured PSC commissioner that I can reach out to, like Ellen Nowak. So our friendship and our relationship really grew and strengthened over the last 3 years. And it's great to be able to sit here and do this podcast and co-host it with you, Kristin, as we talk to Ellen. So with that, I'll pass it off to Ellen.
Yeah, thank you, Julian. I am finishing up my term at the commission. I've been there, it'll be 11 years total. I spent 1 year at the Department of Administration, but it's about 18 years total in state and county service, because I worked in Waukesha for 1.5 years. I worked for the state legislature. And as Julian mentioned, our paths certainly did cross over the last decade. And I remember hearing about there's this young up-and-comer, Julian Bradley, and I need to meet him. And I'm so excited that I was able to get to know you when you came to the Senate and chaired the Energy Committee. And we just really hit it off, because your excitement for learning and your excitement for energy issues is infectious and makes me want to learn more too. So I love talking about it. So, and you were always willing to listen.
I love it. That's pretty cool. If you inspire Ellen to want to learn more about energy issues. I didn't know there was more you could learn, Ellen, at this point.
Oh, there's more. There's more.
That's very true. So I wanted to ask you both too, you're both in these industry leading roles. How do you view your role, Ellen, as a commissioner, and Senator Bradley as the chair of the Utilities and Technology Committee?
Sure.
From day one, I've always said we're economic regulators. That is the heart of what we do. It's safe, affordable, and reliable electricity. And there are, I think, even our commission and other commissioners across the country that have tried to expand that role into being more of an environmental regulator. I certainly do know that we have to take the environment into perspective when we're looking at cases and so forth, but I have to always go back to our role as being that economic regulator. And in our state, since we do have the vertically integrated utilities, we are there to stand in the place of competition. So that is what I see our role as, is what would the scenario be if this were a competitive market, and what is the right response of a regulator in that. And I also think it's a fine line too, sometimes between being a regulator and we don't run the utilities. It's not my job to tell them how to do the management and make certain choices within. And I think that is an important thing also that I always try to keep in mind.
And on my end, so being in the Capitol and being in the legislature, it's being really the first resource that somebody will reach out to for utility or technology related issues. So somebody being one of my colleagues, so another senator, or even maybe another assemblyman, because we split up the committees because we can't all know everything about everything. So we have our committee structure, which helps us specialize. And so that's how I view my role initially within the Capitol, is really being able to break down, speak to, and discuss at length any legislation that's coming before the committee or having to do with policy specifically that's not being handled in the PSC, but rather being proposed through the state capitol and through the legislative process.
It's two very different roles, but I think people really look to both of you and appreciate your openness to listen and communicate with stakeholders. So we really, really appreciate that from both of you.
And I think we also respect our boundaries. Like I try to respect what, we are a creature of the legislature, the agency. And so we can only act within the confines of what the legislature has granted to us. And certainly there have been proceedings that have come before us where I felt that we don't have the authority to act. And I think that's more of a greater statewide policy issue. And I'm very cognizant of that. I never want to exceed the authority that's been given to us, because I have to respect that, the legislature is the one where the broad policy is made, because that's what the people have elected those individuals to do.
And we appreciate that. So it's my turn. I get to ask a question now.
Okay.
And I get to sit in as a co-host. So you said you've done this for quite a few years, 18 years, I think, in total public service. Yeah. At what point did you know that energy issues excited you? So what was it, or when was it in your career that made you say, this is where I'd like to focus my attention?
So I was the chief of staff to Dan Brockus, who was the Waukesha County chairperson started there in 2009. And Lauren Azar was a commissioner through that time. And in 2011, she vacated her seat and this opening came. And I had several people reach out to me while I was there, and I wasn't looking to leave the county exec's office. I loved it. It was great. It was a great team. And I had several people reach out to me and say, you should consider applying for the PSC job. I'm like, what? Why? What are you talking about? And so I started looking at it and started talking to a few people about what it was like and the issues. And I thought, yeah, that actually would be really interesting. And so I put my name in. I did interview with then Secretary Mike Hipsch and some others. And the governor selected me, and I started in July of 11. And it was a really steep learning curve. But I loved it. I treated it like I was back in law school. I grabbed every piece of information I could to kind of like you, Julian, you said you talked to other experts. Anyone that would teach me, I would listen. I read as much as I could. I went to rate school. I went to different conferences to try to meet people and learn the issues going on and keep up with everything in the trade press, and then do the weekly meetings at the PSC. So they always say it is like drinking from the fire hose, and it surely is. And it takes a while for you to get into your rhythm, but as soon as I started learning it, I really enjoyed it and realized there is so much more to learn and to do. And it's something that touches every citizen of the state. So I've enjoyed it. And I've gotten really involved with our National Association, which has been another wonderful part of this job, is to meet other regulators around the country. And because there's only about 260 of us in the country, and facing same and similar issues, how they've handled with it, and talking with them about it, and being able to learn enough where I actually began being the presenter at conferences, not just in the US, but internationally. And it's been an amazing experience that I just don't know where I could have picked that up elsewhere.
If I can just pop in, there's a story about Ellen. So I first came to this role, elected in 20, appointed to start in the 2021 session, and it doesn't take long to realize that you are very well versed on these issues. And I did a national conference where I was talking to a colleague from another state, and he said, "Oh, what committees do you serve on?" And I mentioned that I'm the chair of the Utilities Committee, and he said, "Oh, you must know Ellen Nowak." And as soon as your name was said, a couple of other people who serve on utilities committees or were chairs also knew who you were. And I remember going, wow, she's famous. Ellen's famous as a PSC commissioner. So not just as not just for being very good, but well known, because, you would go to these conferences and you would speak and people listened, and they would try to use you as a resource. So there's a story I had to share. I know I shared it with you after I came back from that conference as well, because I did call and I said, "You're famous. Did you know that?"
Yeah, my family still, they still don't know what I do. So they just think it's weird.
You're
They just
totally
know
famous.
it has something to do with energy. And then I'll get a text, my power is out. I'm like, I don't turn the power on. You get that, right?
You could probably text someone who could. I know it doesn't work that way either.
Yeah.
My joke I wanted to get in before was, when you started in 2011, there wasn't the Electric Wire podcast that you could go back and listen to old episodes of to learn more and educate yourself then. But now people starting out can go back and listen to old episodes that we've done, even with you. Yeah. I know you were here right when we were getting started, and we did an episode on utility regulation and protecting customers. We had you on, and we had Bill Malcolm from the AARP, and that stands out as one of my favorite episodes that we've done, because it was like a master class on utility regulation by Ellen Nowak. We'll put a link to that episode in the show notes too.
So you did mention that it took a little while to get into your groove. So for any future commissioners that might be watching this, how long was that before you got into your groove and so you felt comfortable? And then when did you realize that you are one of the foremost experts in energy issues?
Well, that's very kind to say, first of all, because I still feel like I have a lot to learn. But I realized it was a couple of years, and often I talk to a lot of new commissioners now. And one of the things I started at our national association, what we call an ambassador program, because when you come into this industry and to NARUC, our national association, it's a little overwhelming. And I decided that I'd like to pair up new commissioners with a more seasoned commissioner. And so I started what we called our ambassador program, and would meet with the new commissioners once a year at one of our industry meetings and help them introduce them to the industry and to our association. And they often talk about what we said before. It is like drinking from a fire hose. And I said, just, take it all in. It takes a while for you to get your sea legs and get comfortable talking about the issues. It takes at least a year if you have, some people come in with a little bit of background. I don't remember the exact time, but it was probably somewhere 18 months to 2 years in, when you're getting up and speaking, where you're like really comfortable about that subject matter. And that's just because a lot of times, you're in a room with other experts, and they're going to know if you said something wrong. And so, when I realized I wasn't spending more time studying, getting ready for the presentation, than I was actually presenting, then I started to feel like, okay, wait a minute, I could ride the bike without training wheels now. But this, like I said, we're just always learning. One of the hardest things I think in this industry is to keep up with all of the changes and all of the research going on. And there's, that's a good and bad thing, but you have to be very diligent about just staying on top of the current issues.
What do you think some of the biggest changes have been since you started in 2011 in the industry?
Certainly the generation shift. I think just the change in where we're seeing our generation come from, and the speed at which the public and the politics wants it to be done versus the speed and reality of when it actually can be done. That has certainly changed. And we are seeing a lot more attention in the industry overall, at our level, at the public level. there's just a lot more coverage. One of the FERC commissioners used to say, we do the boring good, and it's not boring anymore. And, it just brings a lot more attention and spotlight on our issues.
Yeah. I think, we were saying as we were getting set up to start recording, we didn't have Zoom back in 2011. There weren't as many webinars. It wasn't as accessible to bring in speakers. And even since I've been at CFC, which is 5.5 years now, I've noticed there's just a lot more people putting on events and looking to help bring information on energy issues. And I think that's good. There's something for everyone. But something I wanted to ask you, Ellen, is what are some of the most memorable events that you have attended or presented at too, and maybe memorable Customers First Power Breakfast events as well?
Well, I have strived to be at every Customers First event that I've been invited to since I've been on the commission.
And we appreciate that so much.
Yeah, well, it's a great group of industry folks. It's a diverse group, and you always have great topics and things to talk about. So it's a nice way to not only learn, but network within people within our state, which is really nice. I think back, and one of the things that I'm proud of doing was working on the challenge to the Obama Clean Power Plan and understanding and kind of educating people about what that would mean to Wisconsin and to our manufacturers and to our ratepayers overall, from the cost and the speed of doing that. And so I got heavily involved. Our commission was one of, if not the only one, to do the particular modeling we did, where we talked about what would the economic impact be to our state. Our staff worked very hard on that. I was able to testify at a U.S. Senate committee hearing on it. Some of the information that our staff did was also used in the lawsuit that went to the Supreme Court that successfully defeated it. So I think it's that kind of work that, bringing people together, really working about an issue that impacted Wisconsin and bringing that to light. That's something I'm really proud of. Otherwise, the commission meetings, what I've always just tried to do is, I hope, bring a sense of very thoughtfulness and integrity to everything I've done. We've obviously had some really big issues come through, like the acquisition that We Energies did with Wisconsin Public Service. That was a very large financial transaction that took a lot of time and resources, and that was one of the bigger transactions that was approved. And I think one of the other things that I like to know that expanded while I was there, was the growth of economic development rates, both for our investor-owned utilities, and municipals started to have those as well. I've always said that having a good regulatory environment and reliable and affordable electricity is a very big component of a healthy state, and it's part of economic development. And that's one of the tools that we can offer. So I'm glad that has expanded over the last decade.
Kind of a transition on that, as you're talking about some of those big decisions. This is a period where we're doing a little bit of reflecting. So I'll ask you, in reflecting back on your time at the PSC, what do you think your legacy will be from that period of time? And then what are those defining decisions that you think will shape that legacy?
It's hard to jump out any one decision, but I hope my defining legacy is that I tried to be as consistent as possible in my rationales. I tried to be very thoughtful, and I read a lot of those records. I'm not going to miss some of that. A lot of the reading. I always came prepared, and I hope that, because I really did take to heart all the parties' sides and all of the information, So I hope that is something that I'm remembered for, is for being thoughtful and for being consistent and being fair.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ellen. You said you're not going to miss the reading, but is there anything you feel you are going to miss about your current role?
You always do miss the people. And I think that for sure I'm going to miss, like I said before, I was very involved at a level with our national association. And I hope whatever I do next, I'm going to continue to play a role in that, because I have made some tremendous friends in the industry. And, they have really become true. Sorry, Leo, you threw me off. We'll do that one again.
I was
Leo,
going to say,
on,
maybe it's fitting to have Leo in the podcast making a cameo back there.
Should, but he's downstairs watching stuff. So I'm going to miss, some of the staff at the PSC. There's not a lot anymore there that have been there longer than me, but it's kind of strange. There's a handful for sure. But, working with them, and because I really learned a lot from some of them, and they've been really great to work with, and meeting people in the industry, for sure, meeting people across the country. Some other commissioners across the country have become some of my very good friends. And I hope to continue to see them in a different capacity down the road, because that's just been one of the greatest blessings of this job, is to see and learn about other parts of our country and meet really great people.
That leads me to one question. You mentioned NARUC, which is the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners.
Yeah.
And I know you've been really involved there, and you're currently chairing the International Relations Committee. And I wanted to ask if you have any particular experiences that stuck out to you from that, or anything you feel you've learned from your participation there.
Well, so actually I follow a line of Wisconsin regulators that were chair of the International. Eric Callisto chaired it before me. And one of the usual benefits of being chair of International is you get invited to some great places. But unfortunately, I took charge of the International Committee 3 months before the pandemic hit. So my timing in life, once again, wasn't great, but we did a lot. We did a lot virtual, and we get a lot of funding from USAID. And it is really amazing to help other countries that are just either setting up or refining their energy markets, and talking to them about what we do and how we do it. And, by no means is our system perfect, but we can help them and show them one perspective. And honestly, we get help when we learn from them along the way. I did have the opportunity when I was in leadership with NARUC to travel to like Istanbul and Spain to also convey US policy there. And I learned from our colleagues in Asia and in Europe. Tomorrow morning, I'm not going out slowly. Tomorrow morning, I'm doing a webinar for Argentinian regulators about public participation in our process. So they're 3 hours ahead. So at 7 a.m. tomorrow, I'll be doing a webinar talking about how the public and parties participate in our PSC process. A month ago, I was just in North Macedonia doing a training for women, a Women in Energy program. And this was more geared towards women who are just starting out their career or at mid-career, and how can they advance further on in their career. And what we did for the entire week it was Monday through Friday. We talked a lot about we practiced a lot of public speaking, presentation skills, negotiation skills, project management. And it was about 25 women from the Balkan countries And it was fascinating. They were really excited. At the beginning, Monday, they were all so shy. None of them wanted to even talk from their tables. They were just afraid to speak. And by Friday afternoon, well, by Thursday night, we had a group dinner. There was a lot of camaraderie there. And Friday, they all had to get up and give a 5-minute presentation. And it was fantastic. And just to see their growth, or they just needed the confidence. Like, they have the skills. And most of those women work at their regulatory agencies or in an energy industry in their respective countries. So, being able to do that kind of stuff has been amazing, absolutely amazing, and something I really didn't anticipate when I first took this position.
I love that.
Yeah,
that sounds like such a cool opportunity for you and also the women who were attending that program.
It's just fun, I think, just to, give people the confidence and to talk about what they want to do and ask questions about anything in the industry. And, a lot of people ask me, like, well, how did I get to where I, land? Well, first of all, no one ever dreams of being a PSC commissioner. It's not like you go to school and, what do you want to be when you grow up? And so one of the things I often tell people is you just have to be open to the opportunities that come along. And even the ones, because again, when I first was approached about this, I was like, I can't do that. I don't know how. And you have to be open to, that's almost a sign that maybe you should take it, because that's when you grow, right? If you're gonna just take a job that you already know how to do or know how to do 90% of, you're not gonna grow. And it's okay to be uncomfortable. And I think just conveying that you're gonna be uncomfortable and that's normal, but it doesn't last forever. But
honestly,
you have to hear that.
It gives me chills. And I think it should give anyone listening kind of hope, because if you were nervous coming into this job, look at you now. And this experience has just shaped you. And it's obvious the ways that you've grown and helped others grow as well.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. You have to, I often tell it to my now, early 20-year-old nieces that you're going to be uncomfortable, but that it would not be normal if you were okay knowing everything right now at 21 years old. And don't be afraid to push.
That's good advice for anyone. We need more. I want more nitty-gritty details. Remember, Ellen, do you remember when you were assigned to the focus on energy oversight as a commissioner? Mm-hmm. That was a huge process. Did you have anything you wanted to share from that time? When I think of your legacy and things I remember you working on at the PSC, that is one of the major ones.
I forgot about that, Kristin. That's the thing is I last 2 weeks ago, we were in Washington, D.C. for our winter meeting for NARUC, and they were very kind and did an honorary resolution for me. And as they read it, I kept going, oh my gosh, I forgot I did that one. I forgot I did that one. And you're right. One of the things that we do at the commission, and other commissions do this too, is, we obviously all read all the materials on the weekly agenda. We participate in that, but there's certain subject areas where the chair appoints a commissioner to be the designated go-to person on a particular issue, whether it's broadband or cybersecurity, which I've had for the last several years, or focus on energy. And then Phil Montgomery, when he was chair, asked me to oversee the focus program. And my EA at the time, Delaney Brewer, and I just really dug into it, because that's a big program. And I think we tried to get our arms around what's going on in there. We held weekly meetings with staff to try to, I think, bring some more transparency and light into what the program is doing. And also, and just like anyone else, I mean, this isn't a knock on the staff, but they kind of get in the rhythm of doing the same things. And bringing in that different perspective and asking, well, why are you doing this, or why don't you do it this way? That's something that we try to do as well. And then also convey to the legislature and make, what is happening, and maybe if there were improvements needed to the program. So yeah, I did learn a lot about that program over the first several years. And then when I became chair, obviously you're more involved in all the administrative stuff of running the agency. And then the last several years under the Evers administration, I've been our point person on the Homeland Security Committee, and being that liaison to the utilities and learning more about cyber and physical security issues.
So, Ellen, you mentioned serving as the point person for cybersecurity, and there's been an increased amount of activity coming from China and Russia relating to cybersecurity, whether it's apps, whether it's balloons, whether it's attempts on grids, such as over in Baltimore, for example, or in Ukraine, and other areas around the world where this is happening. What have you seen, or are you comfortable even talking about regarding the steps we're taking to secure our grids, and what things should we be thinking about going into the future to ensure that we continue to have reliable energy?
Our utilities have, I think we're very lucky to have utilities that have the cyber and physical security top of mind for them. I think even today, you ask any CEO what keeps them up at night, they're going to talk about, attacks on the grid. And while I have always too been trying to press, we can't forget about physical and cybersecurity as we are doing this transition in energy. That's something I keep continually trying to bring a voice to, as we're seeing more distributed energy resources and batteries come onto the grid. That's just more portals to networks for a bad actor to engage in our system. And so I've always tried to remember to bring up and don't forget about cybersecurity. And I know our utilities are not. Just in the last month, I've asked them all for an update. They have to abide by the federal standards under NARUC, the North American Electric Reliability Council, and that's a subset of FERC. So they have standards set at the federal level that are basically like a baseline that they have to go through. But I know that they also engage in audits, not just of their own, staff to keep the staff aware of what's happening, but their physical and their cybersecurity. So they've recently updated me on some extra measures that they are doing to keep both physical and cyber. They are constantly getting updates from what we call the EISAC out in DC. They're always made aware of other threats to the grid that for good reason we all don't know about. So I am confident, at least with our large utilities. The ones that I actually always have bigger concern about are our smaller utilities, just because they don't have the staff and all of the resources to do what larger utilities can and are doing to protect us. So we have worked with particularly our water utilities and our water division and our own IT department. While we don't regulate it, we've tried to push out as much information, particularly to our municipal utilities, about certain threats that might be out there. Or maybe I remember a couple of months ago, we said you should, if you're using this particular software program, you need to download the latest patch ASAP. So we try to, again, we don't regulate that part of it, but in a way it falls under that bucket of reliability. I knew our large utilities were already on top of that, but it's some of the smaller ones that we want to help bring awareness to and provide that resource. And if we don't know it, I've had a good relationship he used to work at the state, someone named Bill Nash. He's now under the Department of Homeland Security and Cyber for this region. And he's always willing to come and talk with our utilities about, what do they need to do to be safe and provide safe and reliable electricity?
Okay, I have one more follow-up question from something you said earlier. You were talking about when you were first getting started, all of the reading you did and all of the things you were doing to educate yourself. Mm-hmm. Do you have advice now for people who are getting started, or even people who are immersed in the industry? What are you reading, and how do you plan to keep up on these issues as you transition back into the private sector?
So one of the things I did early on was I did what we call rate school. And you go for a whole week and you learn about, because setting utility rates is not, it's unique. And one of the things I advise people is don't go too early. Like, don't go if you become a commissioner, just come in the industry, don't go within that first month, because you're still trying to learn the terminology. Go sit in it for a couple months, take a couple classes on rates, and then if you have to in a year or two, go back and do it again. I attended one seminar twice, and I think it's one of the best that I've been to. It's called the Institute for Regulatory Law and Economics. It's heavy stuff. It's not for the faint of heart, and they keep the classes small, and you read a lot of economic theory. There's a little law mixed in there. And I've done it twice, actually. It was about 6 or 7 years apart. And it was great. So it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. You're always learning, and it's always good to go back and learn it again. I read a lot. I think another thing that is not discussed enough, and I've done a couple of there's someone in the industry that puts on something called the Wall Street Dialogues, where he brings in folks from Wall Street on both the debt and equity side, the buy sell, and talks about, because all of our commission meetings, this is the other thing that, maybe the general public, the industry certainly knows, there's Wall Street analysts listening all the time to our meetings. And now we're on YouTube, and they're listening for obviously our outcomes, but other things we say at the meetings. And because they're looking for consistency and a rational thought process. So that's attending and learning more about what Wall Street is needing and listening for, I think, is very important. And that's not because it's something that impacts, the utility per se. It's because what impacts the utility impacts the customer. And it's really important that as a regulator, you're cognizant of, the words you say and the decisions you make have an impact on the investment community.
That's true. And I tell my board this, but when I look back at the episodes of the Electric Wire that get the most listens, it's always when we have a commissioner on, and I'm just always envisioning the Wall Street investors sending this around and analyzing every word you're saying in the process.
Yeah. That's another thing that you don't like. They're not there, but they're there when you're talking. And, it's important to remember when you're at those commission meetings, it's not a good time just for free thoughts. You have to be, because, we all can it's good to have theoretical discussions, but it's also, there's a time and place for it. Because you have to understand, you don't want someone to not deliberately, but just take something out of context that, you were just, it was a theoretical rather than a real discussion.
And the impact
yeah.
that those investors have on utility bond ratings and credit, mm-hmm. and how that eventually trickles down to costs for customers. It's all linked together.
Right. It's just like when you go borrow, get a loan for a car, your credit score is going to impact the rate that the bank gives you. And, that's the same thing. The rate that the utility pays gets passed down to the consumers, the ratepayers. So it's in ratepayers' best interest to have a healthy financial utility.
it's a balance for sure.
Oh, for sure.
Well, thank you so much, Commissioner Nowak. It's been a true honor. And thank you, Senator Bradley, for joining. I'm going to ask you both the final question we ask all of our guests. And that is, if you had all the power in the industry, what would you do with it? Senator Bradley, do you want to start us off?
Sure. So as we take a look here in Wisconsin at our energy policy, it's important for us to have an all of the above approach to energy. So there is certainly a place for green and renewable energy in our state, as there is within our entire country and within this world. But it's important in a place like Wisconsin, whereas we've just seen another pretty bad storm come through, another winter storm come through, that we don't have sole reliance on one form of energy or one form of power. People expect to be able to flip a switch and turn their lights on. They expect to be able to fire up their heat and stay warm. Here in Wisconsin, as those winters hit, not being able to do so could be very deadly. So it's important to keep that reliability, and we can only do that through the method of ensuring that we do have an all of the above approach. That doesn't mean we can't invest in and continue to work through as technology advances, adding in renewable energy. I think that's a great addition to, but reliability and cost have to continue to weigh in as we're working on those. So if I had all the power in the industry, it would just be to use to ensure that our consumers are always coming first, the end users, and ensuring that, we're not doing any energy policy that, puts them at risk.
We're tracking, because what I would do is not allow any more bans on any one particular type of generation. I think that we certainly need to, so we should never say we're never going to have whatever type of generation, because we need to keep all of them available and ready and come back to it. Years ago, we never thought we'd have the gas industry like we do now, but now that's bad. But, in the late 70s, gas was in short supply. We thought we weren't going to have enough. We have to be able to be flexible. I absolutely believe our generation resource mix is going to change, but we shouldn't eliminate any types of generation. That's, I think, short-sighted.
If you don't mind, I just want to thank you, Ellen, just personally for your service to our state, for being a mentor to me as I've chaired this committee and being willing to answer questions at all times and, point me in the direction of resources. As you've mentioned, and we've talked, and anybody that's listening to this podcast certainly knows, these issues are cumbersome. There's a lot of information. You are always learning. And it's just great to be able to have a resource like you, willing to help me, willing to help our colleagues in the legislature, or really anybody that's got those questions. So just on behalf of myself, and I'm sure I can speak on behalf of my colleagues as well, we just want to say thank you for your years of dedicated service to the state of Wisconsin.
Oh, thank you. Well, you're welcome. I enjoy talking about it. I enjoy teaching others about it, what I know. I want to say I leave with a lot of gratitude for all the opportunities I've had, not just at the Public Service Commission, but for, the people who gave me a chance when I probably didn't deserve a chance to have certain jobs and move forward. And that's something that I've now trying to do for others, is give somebody a chance, because, I didn't get to where I was without help from a lot of great people, including, Governor Walker, Scott Jensen, and others, John Gard. I mean, those people, for some reason, believed in me when I was 20 some years ago. And I was able to do some really great things, and I'm really grateful for it.
It's so true, Ellen. And thank you. You're talking about people giving you a chance. I know I first met you. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. Well, probably back in 2006, 2008.
Yeah.
But then when I started at the Public Service Commission as communications director, and, Phil Montgomery brought me in there, but then I got to know you so well as you were just getting started as well. And the mentorship and help and confidence you've helped give me along the way, I couldn't thank you more. I'm pretty sure you're not going to give us too much, but if there's anything you wanted to say about what your plans are next. we've got the floor is yours.
I'm honestly going to take a little time off. And because of the position we're in, it's really hard to look for something while you're in the job. And I really want to be deliberate about my next step and have real conversations with, a lot of different people after I'm out. So I am going to go back to volunteering a bit. I used to volunteer quite a bit over at a Grace, and I'm going to go back and to the hospice and volunteer there. I would love to get back down and see my parents in Florida, and perhaps go to Italy and see my niece studying there. And I expect I'll stay in the industry. I think that would be a good bet, but I'm going to see what comes. I'm anxious too to see what comes next.
Yes, we're looking forward to it and wishing you all the best for whatever comes next.
Thank you. Thanks. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in. Please support our work. You can subscribe to the Electric Wire podcast if you haven't already, and you can follow us on Twitter @The Electric Wire. Thanks also to the members of the Customers First Coalition for supporting this podcast. Our members are Dairyland Power Cooperative, Madison Gas and Electric, the Municipal Electric Utilities of Wisconsin, WPPI Energy, the Citizens Utility Board, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Local 2150, and the Wisconsin Electric Cooperatives Association. Thanks again for listening. We'll have a new episode next month.